What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another Fish the Moment live stream. Today, Randy and I are going to be breaking down the best fall areas on TVA lakes, Tennessee Valley Authority lakes. That's Lake Chickamauga, Gunnersville, the Pickwick, all those lakes around there. We're going to be talking about the best shallow water areas as well as the offshore areas to give you guys a better idea of where you need to be fishing if you're dealing with those fisheries. And even if you're not, hopefully the advice will translate to your lake as well, which in a lot of cases it will, and we'll be able to help you guys get on the best spots this fall. So Randy, how's it going this afternoon?
Doing good, Johnny. Just ready to get into this tonight. It's going to be an interesting conversation because a lot of people they tend to lump the TVA lakes into like one category of the TVA lakes, but every single lake, and I fished all of them. I mean, I fished the entire chain over the years, and every single one of them has characteristics uniquely their own. And so we're going to share with everybody, those differences, and there'll be a few similarities, but it's going to be interesting time tonight.
For sure, and thanks everyone who's on already. We got Timo, Chris, who says he's a first-time live stream listener. Good to have you, Chris. We got Ernest, Christopher, Gary, and Artie. How's it going, everyone? So, got a bunch of people on. Got 60 people already, and we're gonna have more joining in. So hopefully you guys are gonna enjoy the stream. If you guys do have any comments or anything you want to ask, just go into the chat and type in @FishTheMoment, and then type your question, and we'll try to get as many of those answered as we can. And then for those who are listening back on the podcast, welcome. And if you guys do want to check out this live stream after it's done, we are going to be posting it onto the Fish the Moment YouTube channel, as well as on the Spotify and the Apple Podcast apps. So definitely check that out as well. So anyways, let's jump straight into it, Randy. And if you want to start sharing your screen, let's start with one of the TVA lakes, Lake Gunnersville. And there was just a recent Bassmaster Elite Series event there actually last week that fit this fall time of the year. And Gunnersville is kind of characteristic for the amount of grass it has. It also has a lot of boat docks. It has offshore ledges. There's a lot of stuff going on. And he was actually one way up the river throwing a chatterbait in grass. And a lot of their guys were throwing frogs, punching, flipping, stuff like that. And so if you were going to go out to Gunnersville, let's say from the first week of October through the end of November, what would be your top shallow water areas out here?
Well, the thing about Gunnersville that is sort of like, and this is the same with all the TVA lakes that have grass in it. The grass is a huge factor in the fall time of the year, but it changes so much with its density and location. So, when you're talking about grass fishing on a TVA lake like Gunnersville, you can't say like this is a great area or that's a great area because it's constantly changing. I mean, sometimes you get thick grass growth one year and next year it's not even there. So that's sort of something people need to keep in mind. But for me, and I fished Gunnersville quite a bit in the past in October and November before, it's all about the grass that's on the shallow flats, either adjacent to the main river or adjacent to the ditches on those flats. And I'll pull up an area right here. Excuse me, guys. Pull up an area right here that I've had a lot of success in the past when I used to fish Gunnersville a lot in the fall. And this is, sort of the upper end of the lake right here. You've got North Saudi Creek right here. This whole area right here is super famous on Gunnersville for catching lots of big fish. But one of my favorite areas on the lake is this section right through here. Now, there's a lot of water on Gunnersville like Gunnersville like this, except this area is a little bit more unique because you have a lot of shallow grass on these flats just off the main river. And some of your shallowest water that you have on this particular area is right on the main river lip itself. What you have on Gunnersville a lot of times is you got the river drop off. And then I'm talking as soon as it comes up on the flat, like from the lip of the flat right here up maybe 10 feet, it's the shallowest portion of it right here. So you'll have a lot of different type of submergent grass growth right along the main channel part right here. And as you get on the flats, the flats actually deepen up out here. It may be, 3 feet deep right here, and out on the flat it may be 6 to 9 feet deep. depending upon where the ditch is at. And you still have grass out here, but a lot of times it's not matted. It's more submergent, still, under the surface type of grass. So what I'm looking for in the fall time of the year, this time of year, I always like to stay close to this main river channel on the adjacent shallowest portion of the flat off the main river channel. And for example, on this particular area right here, this is going to have, even right now, this is going to have thick matted grass all the way through here with a quick drop into the main channel. And you might be able to, like, say, if you were fishing the grass right along here, you might be able to make a long cast with a frog up and through here and hit some open patches. But it's going to be really thick along the edges all along through here. And it runs all the way up the river. I mean, as you're going up the river like this, as long as you have flats off of the main river, you're going to have that situation. But what happens is the farther you get up the river and you lose these flats like this, and it gets into more of just a straight riverine section like that, that's when you have the grass growing just off the bank, like the coontail moss, like that Bassmaster Elite was one on. The coontail moss will grow right along the bank along through here, and it only grows like down to maybe 3 or 4 feet, and it's only like maybe 10 foot off the bank. But that's the transition you have from the flats like this up to the river part. But on an area like this, when you're talking about grass flats off the main river, there's nothing you can really key on. Everything looks the same, and it's just a matter of putting that flipping stick or the frog in your hand and just covering water until you run into little groups of them.
That's great stuff. And one thing, just to kind of clarify, guys, I'm going to pull up Google Earth here, Randy, just to show them that area to clarify what Randy's talking about with that grass. If we kind of look at some Google Earth images, you can see that there's actually grass, like Randy's saying, growing out in the middle of the lake here. And so a lot of you guys, when you looked at that Navionics map, might think that he's fishing offshore because you're out in the middle of the lake. But really, you're fishing visible grass, just the edge of this really thick grass, punching it with a big weight, throwing a frog over the top of it, maybe throwing a chatterbait on the outside edge. But it is visual fishing, even though you are out technically in the middle of the lake. Like you said, it's only maybe 3 foot of water out here on the edge of this grass. Is that correct, Randy?
Yeah, exactly. And what happens, Johnny, is like, I'll expand out here a little bit, maybe 3 foot like right here, but as you get farther down the lake, and this is what happens, as you get farther down the lake, you still have these adjacent flats, but the flats gradually get deeper. And in this particular section of the lake, we may be 3 or 4 miles down from where I just pointed to, but as you get farther down the lake, the flat here actually gets deeper. So you're talking about the flat comes up to maybe 5 or 6 feet. And then when you get even further down the lake, you're talking about the flat coming up to maybe 7 or 8 feet. So that's why on a lake like Gunnersville is the flats are all relative to the water depth and the density of grass that's grown along it. Because, like I said, the density of the grass all through here varies from year to year. So that's why every time you come to the lake in the fall time of the year, or any time of the year for a matter of fact, it's like a new lake because you're dealing with different areas and density of submergent grass growth.
Sure. And then in addition to like flipping the matted vegetation or maybe fishing the coontail up the river, are there any other shallow patterns that you might try on Gunnersville if you were going there, maybe as like a backup pattern?
Oh, absolutely. The second favorite pattern that I have on Gunnersville is fishing docks. Docks are excellent structures on any TVA lake. And one of the things I like to do is I'll go back in these small creeks, like we'll go back here in Mink Creek, for example, and back in these, coves and creeks off the lake, you have a lot of these real shallow pier type docks that they're all over the place. I mean, there's some on the main river, but a lot of them are back in these creek arms, and that's where I like to fish in the fall time of the year when the water starts falling. But I'll get in through here and I'll just real thoroughly fish all these piers in here, hitting all the piers, shallow to deep, really targeting the docks that have deeper brush on it. And if any of y'all have ever bought any of our lake map breakdowns, you'll notice that I talk a lot about docks. If there's any docks on a lake, I'm always bringing them up because docks are they're just such a great piece of fish holding structure. They hold big fish, they hold numbers of fish, they hold fish all year long. And on Gunnersville, you can catch big bags and win tournaments in the fall time on docks. And also on top of that, a lot of these areas in the fall time of the year, when you have the drawdown, you have a lot of shallow bank grass in between the docks and behind the docks and in between them. You'll have a lot of that grass in like less than 3 foot of water. And sometimes, like I'll go through here and I'll flip the docks, but I'll throw a frog or something like that in between them as I'm moving from dock to dock.
And that's actually exactly how Brandon Cobb was leading after the second day of the tournament. Randy, he was fishing a buzzbait with a toad on the back of it, skipping boat docks with a buzzbait, and then fishing a buzzbait in between the docks. And he had 17 pounds the first 2 days and was leading. So definitely a pattern that was working. I think it died out a little bit later in the week. I don't know if it was just, I think he just ran out of quality fish. The thing with boat docks is there's a finite number of them, and you're catching individual fish. It's not like you're going to be finding groups of fish that are pulling up underneath these docks.
Right, and I never did see any of the Elite Series, so I'm not real familiar with how they even fished it. But yeah, docks. One of the things that you found out about docks. Here's some advice I'll give you on docks. Even pertaining to TVA lakes, particularly when you're dealing with pier style docks, because there's a lot of different types of docks, and on the TVA lakes, they're all pier docks. They're not the floating docks. But bait selection is really, really critical on docks during the fall time of the year, because a lot of these docks we're talking about, the outside corners of the docks may only be in 3 or 4 foot of water. They get a lot of fishing pressure. The bass use them, but they're real bait sensitive. So you have to experiment around. You have to experiment with your sinker sizes, with your colors, with your bait profiles. Sometimes it's something as simple as they want a curly tail versus a straight tail. They want a jig over plastic. And the really, really good dock fishermen that they are the experts at breaking down those fine points of bait presentation on the docks.
Good stuff. And then other than the docks and then that matted vegetation on the main river, any other, like maybe a third pattern that you might try on Gunnersville in the fall?
Yeah, the third pattern.
Brandy's breaking up a little bit here.
And if you've ever fished Gunnersville before, a lot of people know that this particular area down by the lower end over here by Spring Creek and actually the city of Gunnersville, you got a tremendous amount of riprap banks in this particular area here. You got a lot of the bridges, which are so famous for people throwing Alabama rigs on, winning tournaments. But this is a key area in the fall time of the year, because these bass, even though they get pounded, even though the riprap areas and the flow through areas and the bridge piers get pounded all through in here, you can't deny that in the fall time of the year when it gets tough and you got some current moving through the lake, that these are key areas. So you never want to overlook, like I said, the bridge entrances like this, like I said, big stretches of riprap like we have right here. You can catch quality fish on the rock and the concrete on this end of the lake. And you can't get intimidated by the fishing pressure. You can't get intimidated by the fact that, it's maybe been hit 100 times during the day. It's all a matter of timing, and it's a big fish area down here. Anytime I come to Gunnersville in the fall time of the year, I always spend a lot of time in this area here.
That's awesome. A couple of shout outs on the stream. First, thanks to Bass Brothers Fishing for the $5 super chat. It says, keep up the good work, guys, from the Bass Brothers Facebook group. So thanks for that. Got several people asking about specific areas and just different questions. We're going to try to stay on topic with the TVA stuff because we have so much to talk about, but if we do have time at the end of the stream, we might go back and check out a few of these comments. One question from Keith or Comedy said, I'd like to see you guys do a video on a lake you both have never fished before to show us what it would look like if you were going to enter a tournament. And that's a little bit difficult, one, for Randy, because he's fished pretty much every lake in our area of where we live, which makes that a little bit challenging. But really, a lot of the times when I go to all the lakes to fish with Randy, I'm fishing sections of lakes I've never fished before. So it's definitely a case where it's not like when I'm going to the lake most of the time, guys, I know these lakes intimately, especially a lot of the lakes that Randy takes me to up in Missouri. So a lot of times the stuff that we talk about will translate to different lakes around the country. Just because we're talking about Gunnersville here and fishing boat docks, I went out to Table Rock last weekend and caught some really good fish under boat docks on Table Rock Lake, which is a highland reservoir, deep, clear, very different from this one. But at the same time, you can catch them on Gunnersville. So the stuff we're talking about in all of our videos and all these live streams, it applies to a lot of different lakes across the country, not just the ones we're talking about here. Would you agree with that, Randy?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the whole thing about as you get more skilled as an angler, you realize that a bass is a bass anywhere you go. And you can break down and you can duplicate areas just on something as simple as water temperature and water clarity all over the country once you have that basic foundation of seasonal patterns.
For sure. And then one more thing, on all these areas you're talking about, Randy, are these areas that would be good in the spring as well, or are these just fall-specific areas?
Well, yeah, the areas themselves, like on a TVA lake, it's not the areas that change as much. It's the grass and basically the techniques used to fish them. It's just like the area that I talked about, the first part up there by the bridge along the main river. That area is good all year long. I mean, it's good in the pre-spawn. Those bass will spawn on those flats too. I've caught big bags there in the post-spawn, slow rolling spinner baits on grass that's just barely coming off the bottom. So TVA lakes, they don't have quite as many options as maybe some of the man-made highland lakes. So you'll find that the bass use a lot of the same water, but they just position and use it differently based upon the grass growth density or the lack of the grass growth in there. It's not like you have. That's why, like on a TVA lake, you rarely have these oddball ways to catch them. There's a handful of ways most every tournament's won on the TVA lake based upon the season. And a lot of times, like I said, you can catch bass on these shallow flats along the main river on Lake Gunnersville all year long. These fish just live out there. That's the best habitat. There's stumps, there's short grass, there's thick grass. The problem you have on Gunnersville is like when you get to the bank, there's a lot of uniformity. It's gradual slopes. There's not a lot of points that have any drops on them or anything. The bank is not really conducive to the best habitat for the fish. That's why these bass on Gunnersville and a lot of the TVA lakes, they live on the main lake. They live on those shallow shoals and flats. They spawn out there. They stay out there all year long. They just position and do different things based upon the water temperature, water clarity, current, water level, and grass.
Good stuff. Well, let's switch over and start talking about some of the offshore areas. And admittedly, I have never fished on a TVA fishery in the fall. I've fished in the spring and the summer, stuff like that. But I have watched and read every single bass fishing article that's been published since like 1972. So I do have a lot of knowledge just from that and watching shows and stuff. And so I do know in general what the key patterns are on these TVA lakes in the fall. So just a call out on that. But let me start sharing my screen here. And really the big thing for me when I'm trying to break down any lake in the fall is when I'm fishing offshore, you need to find out what the primary type of cover the offshore bass are holding on. And on Lake Gunnersville in the summer, a lot of guys think, okay, I need to be fishing ledges with shell beds or fishing hard spots, something like that, way offshore, with deep diving crankbaits, 10-inch worms. And guys will try to duplicate that in the fall, and they don't have as much success as they do in the summer. And the way I think about offshore fishing in the fall is that you're going to have to change your approach from the summertime fishing to when you fish in the fall. The types of structure, the areas of the lake, everything, they change a lot. So for example, a really good area on Gunnersville in the summertime out here might be on the tip of this point right here where you have these two creek channels intersecting. The top of the point is in 17 foot of water, and there might be a shell bed right here. And those fish might stack right up on that point, and you can catch them on a deep diving crankbait, a flutter spoon, things like that. You could even catch them further out here towards the middle of the lake on some of these long main river bars where they are like 20 foot dropping to 40 foot on both sides. These are great summertime areas on the Gunnersville. Now, in the fall, those areas are sometimes still productive, but they don't have the big groups of fish like they do in the summertime and like post-spawn. And the reason for that is because the bait fish are going to be a lot more spread out. In the summer, in the post-spawn, a lot of your big gizzard shad are going to be out here on the main river, setting up in these creek channels and kind of ditches and cuts here, pulling up into that 20 foot of water to feed on the shell beds and on the hard spots. In the fall, though, those bait fish are a lot more spread out, which means it spreads out the bass. And because there's so much great offshore cover and structure on Gunnersville, it spreads out those bass a very long distance. And you might find that you can catch fish in 2 foot of water offshore in the middle of grass flats, but also catch them up in 12 foot of water, 15 foot of water. And these fish are going to be moving and shifting and changing through these grassy areas almost day to day because the bait fish are moving. That means that when I go fishing in the fall, especially like on Lake Gunnersville that has grass, my number one key is to not get tied into one specific offshore area. It's not like in the summer again where you can pull up on a ledge or a bar and fish there and catch fish there day after day after day. Great case in point is when Brian Thrift last year was fishing one of the Toyota Series events on Kentucky Lake. He was finding some fish on some of these main river bars, and there wasn't that much grass there, but he was fishing, I think, like a shell bed or something. And he sat on one spot and made a cast all day long with a big topwater and caught 26 pounds or 24 pounds or some giant bag of fish. Well, the next day he went out there and he sat on the exact same spot, and he literally zeroed the next day. And what happens is that these fish pulled up on that spot that he found, and they bit, but the next day they had moved, let's say 20 or 30 yards down this bar, or maybe even 100 yards, following those bait fish around, which makes it very, very difficult to track down these fish. And he even admitted when he found those fish, he didn't have anything going on in practice, so he just took a big, giant walking topwater, just got on the main river and just started fishing it down the main river. And then when he had a 6-pounder blow up on his bait, he power pulled down, or just like spot lock down and just cast and cast. He didn't spot lock, he doesn't have spot lock, but he stopped the boat and cast on that same spot and caught his fish. And he said the best thing he could have done is the next day not get caught up on that one specific spot he caught his fish on, but continue to cover water and throw that topwater down these ledges and these drops. And that's what I would do if I was going to Gunnersville. What I would focus on is trying to locate an area of the lake. For example, this creek right in here, where you might have a nice concentration of fish. And Seabold Creek always has a lot of fish in it. And I would determine, okay, where are the fish in practice? Maybe they're out here more towards the mouth of this creek. And I would try to figure out maybe what depth they're in, what they're holding in, whether it's offshore grass or maybe around some shell beds or whatever it is. And then what I would do is during my tournament day, I would start where those fish were, but I would be making my way into the creek, working moving baits like a lipless crankbait, a chatterbait. If you use an Alabama rig is a great time or great bait to throw in the fall. And I would be working my way back into Seabold, trying to relocate a group of fish that's pulled up on an offshore area that's set up there that you can catch. Now, obviously, when there's grass, you can't graft these fish because the grass is going to mess up the image. The fish will be hiding in the grass and you can't see them. But on a lot of other lakes, you actually can graft some of these fish with your fish finder, especially if they're deeper than like 7, 8, 9 foot of water. But, if the fish are shallower than that in like, let's say 3 to 5 feet, the way that I would find them offshore is just to follow these contour lines, maybe in practice identify the unique structural elements, the high spots, the clumps of grass, things like that, work my way through this bay, and each day relocate a school of fish. And if you're in an area like a Seabold Creek that has a big population of fish, the chances of you running into them again are pretty high. And that's how a lot of the guys were catching them actually on Gunnersville. They were literally just running these big flats with topwaters, buzzbaits, chatterbaits. And the guys that were able to consistently relocate those fish day after day did well. The guys who didn't, they didn't do so well. But the guys that really focus on one specific spot and tried to milk that one spot were not successful. So that would be my recommendation on pretty much all of these Tennessee River fisheries. And then one other thing to really call out is if you're fishing on the Tennessee River and you have grass, so let's say you're in a Gunnersville, Chickamauga, things like that, you want to make sure you're in a section of the lake that isn't overflowing with grass. So if we look at the Google Earth here, you can see that in this area of the lake, there's a lot of grass on the main lake that's topped out, that's actually matted up. That's not going to be conducive for offshore fishing because those fish are actually underneath those mats, and you're going to have to flip them and throw a frog or whatever on those fish. Instead, you need to make your way down to an area of the lake, like for example in Seabold, where that grass is not topped out. You don't have as much matted vegetation. There's a little bit here, but a lot of it is going to be submergent, underwater vegetation. That's going to allow you to then cover your water with a moving bait, a chatterbait, a lipless crankbait. And that's how I would prefer to fish as opposed to going up the river and flipping mats. Now, a lot of guys caught fish flipping mats and did really well doing that in this tournament on Gunnersville recently, but there were also some guys like a Brandon Cobb who mixed in the shallow water docks with some of the offshore grass with a buzzbait and stuff, and he had a couple spots that were good, and then they disappeared on him the next day because they were moving. He wasn't able to relocate them, and he didn't do as well in the tournament. If he was able to relocate those fish like we talked about offshore, he may have done better. So that's kind of how I would approach the offshore fishing in the fall in Gunnersville. Don't get keyed in on a spot. Try to relocate your schools day after day because you know those bait fish are moving. Does that sound about right to you, Randy?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, I've had several top 10 finishes at Gunnersville several different times of the year down there. And one thing that I can share with everybody on that is the fact that, just like what Jonny was saying, it's like you got to keep moving. You got to keep locating that bait fish. But without exception, every time that I've done good there, it's been in one particular area. It's like Gunnersville and the TVA lakes. They are not very good pattern fishing lakes. It's almost like, once you get into an area, and just like Jonny was talking about Seabold Creek, that's a lot of water in there. And if you find an area like that you can tell right off the bat if the quality and the numbers are there different than other areas of the lake. And and to that point, you could take an area like Seabold Creek, like Jonny was saying, and you could make that your lake yourself for the whole tournament and not ever leave it. But you have to move around and you have to relocate that bait fish and relocate those fish, particularly the ones that are out in those mid-depth areas off the bank.
For sure. So that's kind of the deal then on Gunnersville. We do want to start talking about some other TVA lakes, though, because they're not all the same. Like Randy talked about at the beginning of the stream, not every TVA lake is built the exact same way. But before we get into that, I do want to take a few seconds to just talk about some stuff we have going on fishthemoment.com. We always do this part, guys, just because we want to share with you all the products we're offering, and obviously we're doing these live streams and doing the videos, and I can tell you that we're not making enough money just off the YouTube videos to be able to support ourselves. And so to make sure we have gas in the boat, make sure we can keep producing content, the support on fishthemoment.com is greatly appreciated, and it's what allows us to do what we do. And some of the great things we have offered on fishthemoment.com first are the lake breakdowns. And Randy actually makes these lake breakdowns where you can actually get 60 different areas on lakes across the country spread out across 4 different sections. And we have actually Kentucky Lake here in the fall, and the TVA Lake that we just posted. Also Fort Loudon, another TVA Lake. And we have lakes all across the country that we have given spot recommendations on, both shallow and offshore. And if you're really wanting to dial in your offshore fishing, your shallow fishing, or just your fishing in general in the fall, these map breakdowns are a great place to start. They are a lot less expensive than booking a guided fishing trip, and I guarantee you they're going to give you more information than you will get if you go out with a guide, because they're only going to take you to a handful of spots. These actual maps give you the best conditions, the baits, why you should be fishing there, a lot of background on the lake, so much information that really helps set apart or help you become a better fisherman on these lakes. And then another thing we have offered just real quick are our virtual seminars. And we actually filled up the virtual seminar for this Thursday, which is an advanced jerkbait fishing class from Randy. We're going to be opening that up again for November, and we're going to have another 30 people to be able to join in. And Randy actually helped design the Megabass Vision 110 for Megabass, and so he knows a lot about jerkbait fishing. So definitely sign up for that one again if you do want to attend that. And then I am offering an advanced offshore bass fishing course. The when, where, and how to find offshore bass, how to rotate offshore areas, identify subtle, sneaky offshore areas versus the community holes, when to fish community holes versus when to run sneaky areas, the best conditions to fish spots in, how to rotate spots based on conditions, all kinds of secrets that I've learned over the years from offshore fishing. We only have 10 spots left in this class, so definitely go sign up if you're interested. That's October 21st. And I also have another advanced bass fishing electronics course available that I go into how to identify fish on the fish finder, know if they're catchable, know what baits to throw down there, and know if you should leave a spot because the bass aren't catchable. So a lot of good information in these seminars, and so definitely check those out, fishthemoment.com. Now let's jump back over and talk about some other TVA lakes. So, and by the way, thanks, shout out to Brian Reed for the $4.99 super chat. Appreciate that. So next up, Randy, let's take a look. We're over here on Gunnersville right now. Let's roll over and take a look at Pickwick Lake. Pickwick is a little bit of a different animal. It actually has a little bit better smallmouth population in it, and it also has a lot less grass in it than Gunnersville. So you're going to be dealing with a very different set of conditions than what you'd be facing on Gunnersville. So if you could pull up Pickwick, what are some shallow water areas you'd be looking for there?
Yeah, again, Johnny, I fished quite a few tournaments at Pickwick during the fall time of the year. I mean, a lot of different, whether it be FLW's Bassmaster like that. So I'm pretty familiar with the bite down there. But Pickwick, like I said, it's a TVA lake, but it's really set up a lot different than Kentucky Lake. You don't have the type of main river flats off the lake that you do on Kentucky Lake there. You don't have near as much grass. You got some grass, but you don't have near as much grass off the main river. And then on top of that, you have the smallmouth factor. I mean, yep. Pickwick has, they got some big smallmouth in it. They use the main river a lot. But Pickwick, it's more on the main lake part of it. It's more of a hard structure deal. So, like I said, what I was talking about, the shallow areas on top of the offshore flats next to the main river, that's not as big of a factor there. So what I did at Pickwick, here's my favorite area on Pickwick Lake by far. This, if you run down here on the lower end of the lake, here's where most of the tournaments are out of. Right here up by the dam area. I can't remember the name of the takeout there, but right here, if you run all the way down the lake into the Tom Bigby waterway right here, this is a waterway that actually runs for probably 20 miles, and it actually connects. There's another lake that you can get into down here. This area right here, and I consider this part of Pickwick Lake, it's accessible from the lake. This is a key fall area for me right here. It's just miles and miles and miles of riprap. This is in a completely riprap line canal that runs for, like I said, for probably 20 miles. And I've been really good in here in tournaments. There's been guys that have come close to winning tournaments here in the fall time of the year. And it's just a matter of putting the trolling motor down and covering this riprap with moving baits. And it's sort of like the grass. You got to, you don't ever know where you're going to run into them. But when fishing's tough on the lake in the fall, this is my number one area right here. Second to that, I'll get back in these major creeks here. This is Bear Creek, for example. This is another area I've done really good in the past. And a lot of people, when they come in here, you got a lot of water here. You got a lot of boat docks. You got isolated wood laydowns. You may, as you get farther back in here, like in this area, you've got some water willow cover, a lot of overhanging trees, that type of stuff. And it'll hold fish in the fall time of the year. I bypass all this. I bypass it all, and I'm back in here in the old creek itself. Old Creek Channel, past the flat. In the fall time of the year, it can be hard to get into because it's shallow through here. If you've seen many of my fall lake map breakdowns, I cover a lot of this type of water because it's really good fall water. But I'm getting back in the old channel here. It's usually mud banks, gravel lined, and there's a lot of isolated wood cover all the way through here. And I go in these areas in the fall time of the year when the lower the water, the better, where it's harder to get into. And I methodically and real thoroughly just work my way as far as I can get up these creek arms here. And I'm, just totally target fishing around shallow cover. I mean, that's the main deal. Any of these major creeks like this, let me scan out, find some more. Any of these major creeks, are going to have some of this type of water in it. These basically areas like this that, flats that turn into the old channel right here. And this is old school 101 power fishing. It's how I grew up fishing in Oklahoma and Missouri. I've taken it around the country. It's worked in different parts of the country as well. Those are really two key deals. Back of the creeks, Tom Bigby Waterway. And the third area that you can catch them really good shallow is if you come up on the upper end of the lake here, and this is another really famous, popular area on the lake. You got the dam right here that connects Wheeler with Pickwick Lake. This area right here, actually even farther down here, when you come down, it probably like to this area here. This entire area right here is a key fall area on Pickwick for smallmouth and largemouth both. What you have here is on this upper part of it here. This is a pretty dangerous area to fish because you got a lot of really swift current in here. You got a lot of rock piles that are just under the water, but these bass will get up on the riprap banks on these upper end. They'll get in some of these deeper rock piles. It's shallow. When I'm talking deeper, I'm talking about 5 or 6 feet in this area here. And then as you move on down, this gets deeper here and it becomes more shoreline oriented. And all fish like any isolated wood laydowns through here, overhanging trees, that type of stuff. And once you get down below the bridge in this area here, you got several sections of main river vertical wall bluffs that are just outstanding. I'll get tied on these bluffs here. I'll just fish parallel to the bluffs in heavy current, fishing into the current. And I've caught a lot of big smallmouth and largemouth in this whole area right here in the fall time of the year.
Awesome. Good stuff. That's exactly what I'd be doing for the shallow water stuff too. So completely agree on that end. And then in terms of the offshore stuff, Pickwick, I've actually had the most experience of all the TVA fisheries. So I am pretty familiar with Pickwick. And a lot of times, again, kind of to ground you guys in the summer, a lot of the best offshore fishing is going to be kind of in this from the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway here, kind of this area, this creek, Yellow Creek, down to maybe about the bridge down here. Where's that bridge? To this bridge here. That's like kind of your key offshore structure ledge fishing. When you hear ledge fishing on the Tennessee River on Pickwick, this is where a lot of it happens. There's some further down and some further up, but that's kind of the key. And a lot of guys catch them on the main river channel where it drops from 20 foot to 50 foot of water, and they'll catch them suspended, sometimes even as deep as 30 foot of water off the edge of these channels on big scrounger heads and big Magnum flutter spoons. I've caught a ton of fish just down all these channel ledges here and just all down the stuff. There's just fish that get on these channel ledges. And because they're so good in May, June, and July, a lot of guys try to force this pattern, get these fish to bite later in the year. And it's just not a deal. It just doesn't happen. It's not going to work. You can catch some fish out there, but it's not going to win you a tournament most of the time. So instead, what I try to focus on, if I'm going to look offshore on a Pickwick where there's really not that much grass, the difference between my approach on Gunnersville and Pickwick is that on Gunnersville, there's a lot of submergent and floating vegetation. On Pickwick, there is some, but not nearly as much. As a result, what I'm trying to focus on is trying to find these areas where the bass are going to be moving from that main channel back into some of these bays and creeks. And there's going to be small little subtle kickouts that are going to be close to a main river channel or close to these creek beds, halfway back in these little shortcuts. And not every single one of these is going to be good, but a lot of times you'll find little shell beds or stump rows or a little ditch with just some harder bottom that's in the kind of mouth to the middle third of these creeks. And I catch fish out of these areas in May when I've been to Pickwick. And I know that there's guys who catch them here in the fall just from friends I've talked to. And basically what I would do is I would find these short little cuts, these creeks, and try to find places where those fish are moving from the main river back into these creeks. Now I would be graphing all these areas looking for bait fish. I would try to find the bait fish, and let's say I find the bait fish in the mouth of this cut here. I would then try to find hard areas, stumps, things like that, adjacent to where the bait fish are, in a little bit shallower water. A lot of these areas are going to be no deeper than, let's say, 10 foot of water. You're not going to be fishing 20, 30 foot of water out here. A lot of it's going to be a little bit shallower. You can find fish even on these bigger flat areas, like these big open flats, and where the channel is only maybe 10, 12 feet, or the high spots are 10 to 12 feet deep, dropping into 20 foot of water. Those can be good. But in general, I'm really focused on fishing the mouths of these small little cuts up this lake and trying to find those fish that are migrating in and setting up on these shallower bars, 5 to 8 foot, 10 foot of water, where the bait fish are. And again, these fish are not going to sit there for long. They're going to move every 2 to 3 days, maybe even every day. So you're going to have to follow the bait fish, follow the fish. Now I'm going to be running 30 to 40 of these areas a day, burn them with crankbaits, maybe a football jig, just real quick, but just cover in water until I run into a group of them. And then once I hit a group of them, you'll catch 3 or 4 fish. And you might go hours between hitting a spot that's good, but I do avoid trying to get into like a bear creek where you have these giant creeks because there's so much water and these fish can move into so many areas. And instead, I'll kind of focus more on these small little cuts to do my offshore fishing. And one question we have here is, would this apply to ledge drop-offs into the creek bed as well? Ledges, pumps, points, it's all the definitions are the same. So like, for example, this is a channel ledge. This is a channel ledge. This is a channel ledge. They're all ledges or pumps, points. You can call them a bunch of different things. The biggest thing is you want to find deeper water, close to shallower water, where there's bait fish in the mouths of these cuts and leading into these bays and creeks. And then you have shallower water close by to where the bait fish are. So like, for example, if these bait fish are here in 16 foot of water, you have a 12 foot hump here with some rock or some shell, that's a great little spot those fish might pull up on. Again, they might only be there though for like 2 days and then they're gone. So you're not going to sit there and just pound them on the spot in the fall for a week or 2 or 3 weeks straight. It's going to be one of those deals where you're going to find a little deal, and it might only work for a few weeks. It might this creek up here. You might find that these fish are setting up on the main river out here in July. In August, they're maybe still out here, and then into September, they make their way back in this creek, maybe setting up on this drop. And then as they work their way back in, maybe they set up on this little point here, and then they're there for 2-3 days. Then next up, they're over on this point here. And then 2 or 3 days later, they're on this point here. 2 or 3 days later, they're over here. And then they're back here. And they're constantly on the move until they get to the point where they're really shallow, and it's hard to find those offshore fish. And you might be better just fishing shallow. And that's kind of the trick with fall fishing, is that a lot of times I'm not just fishing offshore. I'm mixing in shallow water and offshore fishing because the offshore fishing becomes way less consistent on the Tennessee River, or any lake for that matter, in October, November, and December. Usually I can pick off maybe half my fish offshore, maybe 1 or 2 fish offshore of my 5, and I have to catch 2 to 3 or 4 of my fish up shallow. So I'm going to be bouncing around, and I'm not just going to check offshore in these pockets and cuts. I'll also run some shallow bank grass, or run some laydowns with a buzzbait, or run some riprap or shallow rock with a square bill. And I'm going to be bouncing around trying a bunch of different stuff, shallow and offshore, to catch fish. I'm not just going to focus all offshore all day like I might do on Pickwick in the winter and in the summer. So that's one way I would do it, and that's kind of in the traditional ledge fishing section of the lake. And I would also do some offshore fishing in that same area Randy's talking about, up lake, by the dam here. So this is actually the Wilson Lake Dam. And as Randy mentioned, there's a lot of rock piles and things out here in the middle of this area. This is like the biggest community hole on Pickwick. And these dams, they generate a lot of water. Like 4 or 5 generators will be open, pouring water. And a lot of smallmouth will set up randomly out here in the middle on rock piles that you can graph. And I've caught them out here before, just dragging a football jig, throwing a swim bait on a like 3/4 ounce jig head, like a big paddletail swim bait. And you can do that actually all the way through till you get around this island past here where you use these like power lines. And there are fish, smallmouth, that will set up on all these little shoals and ridges and stuff. And they'll sit there for a lot of the year. You're not going to have it so that these smallmouth are just only there in the spring or the summer. Like, they'll be there year round. It's just these fish are a little bit trickier to track down. I haven't spent as much time figuring them out with the smallmouth. If I was going to fish down here, honestly, or this part of the lake, I would be fishing the bluff walls like Randy was talking about. Fishing bluff walls with a crankbait, a jerkbait, a football jig, as opposed to trying to fish the offshore fish out here. If I was going to fish offshore, I would do it up the lake up here. So that's the offshore deal for me. Randy, anything else to add on any of that?
Yeah, it's, that's one of the things about fall fishing. It's a grind if you're fishing off the bank or the shore. I mean, this is a time of year where you got to work. You got to work for every fish that you catch. And it's just like Jonny made a good point. A lot of times it's mixing it up. You may have a couple of those, medium depth offshore places, and you may have, some shallow stuff that you can run. And that's the sort of the mental approach. It takes a mental shift a little bit in the fall time of the year to just realize that, on a good day, if you catch a limit, just 5 or 6 fish, that can be a good day. So you sort of have to adjust your expectations accordingly. And like I said, it's one of my favorite times of the year to fish, but it's also one of the most challenging.
For sure. Well, one thing I'm seeing here, guys, we got 400 people watching the stream right now, which is awesome. And one thing we've never really done before is try to incentivize you guys to share out the stream. We don't really ask you guys to do that often, but one thing I want to do is to see if you guys can help get this stream up to 500 viewers. I'm just going to do this off the cuff because I don't also work. I see other podcasts doing this. But if we can get this stream up to 500 viewers, and we're going to be on for another 30 minutes, I will give away one $100 prize pack of fishing lures and fishing tackle. $100 of baits. We will send it, and we're going to message one of the people on the stream who's watching, and we're going to actually give you a $100 prize pack of fishing lures. So if you guys want to get a $100 prize pack, start sharing the stream. We're already up to 418 as I've been talking about this. I don't know if you guys are like getting your brothers and sisters all at once to join in. I don't know what's happening, but it's working apparently. But if we can get the concurrent viewers up to 500 viewers, I'll give away a $100 prize pack of fishing lures. So share that with your friends, share it on Facebook, however you need to do it. I don't really know how that will work, but just try it. We'll see if we can get to 500 viewers, giving a $100 prize pack of fishing lures away. So some of those are those baits you gave me, Randy, too. Got some of Randy's secret Ned worms and like old trick worms. We got some Bridgeford beef jerky in these packs, real grips. We got a bunch of good stuff in there. So 30 minutes, get us to 500 concurrent viewers. We're at 420 already, and $100 prize pack coming your guys' way. So cool. Well, let's jump into another TVA lake, Randy, because Pickwick is its own animal. We have that. We have Gunnersville, and I would say that Pickwick is more along the lines of not having a lot of grass. Gunnersville has a lot of grass. The in-between is like Chickamauga. Chickamauga has a mixture of some grass, not a ton of grass, but the northern portions there's a good amount of grass. In the southern portions there's not as much grass. And I think that that's kind of a good in-between between Gunnersville and Pickwick. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely so. Chickamauga is like I'd say it's rivaling Kentucky Lake as one of the most famous lakes on the chain just because of the size of the fish that have been taken out of it over the last few years. But Chickamauga is set up completely different. And, yeah, let's get into it and go over some details on it here.
Awesome. Well, let's pull up. Yeah, you have Chickamauga pulled up there. Let's just jump in and start talking about some of the top areas or top patterns you would try to run here. And I'm sure there's going to be some overlap from Pickwick and Gunnersville, so maybe talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, Chickamauga is one of those lakes that I've never seen a grass on the TVA lake on the TVA chain that the grass changes so much here. I mean, the grass changes radically year to year here. A lot of it has to do with, floods they may have that rip it up, the weather, how cold it is in the wintertime. But it's really inconsistent where the grass is. So one of the things that I've always done here, and I fished a lot of tournaments on Chickamauga. I fished my first Bassmasters Classic on the lake in 1986. Got a lot of time on this water. For me, what I do on Chickamauga, the success I've had is you can see, if you see the lower end of the lake, or not lower, but the main part of the lake right here, this is the area it's famous for all the ledges, that type of stuff. Most a lot of the big bass come in these creeks here on Alabama rigs in the pre-spawn. But for me, I don't ever fish this right here. I love this portion of Chickamauga in this section right here, and I want to tell you why. This particular section of Chickamauga, which is a giant area, this is not a small area. This has the most consistent grass growth that I've seen on the lake anywhere that you can find on the lake. You don't have a lot of it up the Hiawassee River, although this is one of my favorite areas to fish, and I'll get in that in a little bit. But the grass difference on here is you have a lot of grass on Chickamauga in these little sloughs, these shallow sloughs off the main lake that are all up through here. You don't have the grass on Chickamauga does not grow out off the main flats like this, like it does on Gunnersville. The grass on Chickamauga, it grows shallower. Like if you come into this particular junction area of the Hiawassee and the main river, it grows back in these shallow little cuts like this, these shallow bays, little stuff like this, little offshoots off the water. And some of these areas, they're 8 or 10 feet deep. So they've got some deep grass in through there. And one of the top fall techniques that I like to do in this particular area is I sort of make the lake, when I go here, I make the lake like this is my lake right here for the whole thing when I'm concentrating on grass. And I'll go back into some of these areas like this, and you'll have patches of grass with edges like this particular area right here. I've done really good in here on a chatterbait on the grass, and you got this. It's like a 3 to 6 foot flat all the way through here. You'll have some real defined edges of grass. It can be of varying thicknesses, but it's a matter of just getting in these sloughs, doing a lot of graphing, a lot of side imaging, finding the shallow grass that's on these flats and through here. Same as if you come up the lake here. All of these backwaters like here that you come in here, all these backwater sloughs in like right through here, all this type of stuff, lots of grass in here. Back of these cuts, a lot of that grass in the 4 to 6 foot range. You also have a tremendous amount of lay down wood all through here, which is a prime, shallow water cover. Lay down wood and grass on the upper end of Chickamauga is a big deal. And I've caught a lot of big ones through here. I've caught a lot of really good fish. But for me, this right here is the most consistent part of Chickamauga in the fall for me. When I'm talking about Chickamauga, lower water levels, water starting to cool, this Hiawassee River becomes alive in the fall time of the year. And you got a lot of different stuff going on in here. This particular area through here, all the way up, you've got tons and tons of isolated blowdown trees, isolated wood, stumps, mixed in with varying rock angle degrees. And I'll go through this entire river section up here and just pick apart these laydowns that are all along the main river, all the way up through here. Second to that is once you get up above the bridge here, you have a lot of boat docks on the main part of the channel, as you can see right here. I have caught bunch of big bass, on all these docks, back in these little coves off the river up here. These are pier style docks. They're shallow. They're in 3 to 5 foot of water. Water's really dirty up here compared to the lower lake. You've got visibility in this area right here, normally less than 12 inches. Lots and lots of good fish up here. And then also on these flats that are off the main river, you got these are big, shallow, vast flats in here. And you've got a lot of mixed shallow bank grass like water willows or some reeds or shallow laydowns through here. This is all key fall area. These bass move back in this type of water in the fall time of the year. And there's a lot of this other type of water if you go up the lake here. These two big areas here, they don't look big here, but they're really big. Same deal. You have a mix of boat docks in here. You got a lot of flat banks, gravel, sort of a mud composition, isolated laydowns, water willows, that type of stuff. It's just excellent areas to throw a spinnerbait in, flip a chatterbait, a frog, that type of stuff. But for me, Chickamauga, the fall time, I'm above the bridge here, all the time. I'm fishing in this area right here.
Awesome. And that's really cool because it's different from a little bit from what the other lakes were offering, in that you have these different river systems. But in general, what it sounds like, Randy, is that you're really focused on going up into the shallower, dirtier water up the river sections, whether that was in Gunnersville, where like Frank Talley won that recent Bassmaster tournament way up the river, running into the Tennessee Tom Bigby waterway back of the creeks on Pickwick, or running way up the river here on Chick. You're not spending a lot of time down on the main body of the lake, down by the dam in the clear water. Is that correct?
No, I prefer the upper end of the lake if the conditions are right for it. And the best conditions for the upper creek arms, the upper river arms on the TVA lakes is that drawdown. When that water is at the low, almost at the lowest point that it gets throughout the year, that's when those fish on the upper end of the lake will start relating to the isolated targets. They relate to, whatever bank cover is available, whether it be docks, shallow wood, laydowns, water willows, any type of bank, shallow, emergent grass. Every body of water is different. But for me, the key revolves around that dropping water temperature and the dropping water level. If you have dropping water levels and you have dropping water temperatures, it puts those big fish shallow more than any other time of the year other than during the pre-spawn. And another thing is, it's a little bit simple. It's a little bit easier to locate the fish up in this area. The downside to it is a lot of times the shallow cover, it attracts a little bit more fishing pressure because you are dealing with obvious targets. You're not dealing with some of the more subtle stuff like the way Jonny likes to fish off the bank. So it requires a different approach. It requires more stealth. It requires more creativity and imagination with your lure selection and your boat positioning. So there's a lot of variables that go to it that allow you to be successful in this shallow lake.
Awesome.
You can't just slop through these areas. They're shallow. They're just more difficult to catch, and you really have to be methodical and thorough in your approach.
Awesome. That's great stuff. And guys, we hit 500 viewers. It took like 10 minutes. You guys apparently shared that with everyone in all of your towns because people just sort of diving in 500. So I'm going to have someone on our team pick one of the viewers here that is in the live chat. And in the future, I need to figure out the better way to do these giveaways. I'm probably going to try to stream this to Facebook as well. But if you do want to get selected for a $100 prize pack, just leave a live chat. There's a live chat function if you're on your phone or on the computer. Leave a chat, and then once everyone's chatted, we'll give it like 5-10 minutes. Make sure you put a chat in there, or leave a comment on the YouTube page. I'll have my team pull all that together, and before the end of the stream, I will announce the winner of the $100 prize pack, and you can just email me, and I will get your address, and I'll send that to you. So just be leaving some live chats. Put something in there. Just say, love the stream, or I like the new Fish at the Moment hat. Whatever you guys want to say, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be those things. But let's get into some of the offshore stuff then on Chick. So big deal on Chickamauga for me on offshore fishing is that I have been Chick like later in the year, but not like into September, not necessarily fall. But the big thing to notice on Chick is that you have a very distinct difference between different sections of the lake. So for example, on the lower end of Chickamauga, you have a lot deeper water, less grass. Midsection of the lake, you get shallower flat areas with some mixed grass, maybe not a ton of grass, but there is a decent amount of grass. And then as you get up here closer where Randy's talking about, you get a lot of good offshore grass off the bank like you do on Gunnersville in certain sections. And then you also have these river arms up here. Now, for me, if I'm going to try to catch fish in the fall, I want to put myself in a position where I have really good mix of shallow water as well as offshore areas to fish, because I don't feel like on Chickamauga in the fall you're going to be able to go and catch a ton of really big fish grouped up offshore. You might get one or two good fish offshore and then get one or two good fish up shallow and mix it in. So I'm going to find an area where I feel like I can do multiple things. And for me, that's going to be this midsection of the lake. If we kind of take a look at it actually on Google Earth, let me pull Google Earth up. I want to find an area where I can both fish some offshore grass, maybe fish some shallow docks, and fish some offshore structure. So in my mind, basically, I'm going to look on Google Earth until I start seeing some offshore grass. Boom, right here. We have some offshore grassy areas. This means I might be able to catch them on a chatterbait or buzzbait or a topwater over the top of some of this submergent and emergent grass. I can also work my way down here and maybe fish some of these main lake boat docks and some of the boat docks back in these creeks. That gives me a shallow water option. And I also have the ability to work my way down here where there's less offshore grass and try to start fishing from shallower bars and some shallower offshore areas. Now you might be wondering, well, what do these areas look like? So let me walk through them one by one. First up, the offshore areas that I would really focus on if you want to just be offshore focused, offshore heavy. What I would be focusing on is trying to find shallow bars that are in anywhere from, let's say, 3 to 8 feet of water in the mouths of pockets and cuts, just like we were talking about on Pickwick. So what I'm looking for example, in the mouth of a bigger creek like this is I want to find a shallow bar where you have or shallow point where that creek channel swings in and comes up against, let's say, 3 to 5 feet of water, maybe 8 foot of water. And as that lake gets drawn down, you're going to have shallower water up on top of these. And a lot of these points are going to have shell beds on top of them. That's going to be super key on Chickamauga as these fish start moving back in. Hard spots and shell beds. And your big 8 and 10 inch gizzard shad are going to group up on these shell beds and these hard spots as you lead into these creeks. And some of these might actually be back in these creeks a little bit further, but a lot of them are going to be right at the mouth or a little bit further towards the main river. So for example, if we take a look at this creek right here, here's another little point that sticks out. And it's not like these spots, again, are going to be good every single time you pull to the lake. This spot might only be good the second week of October or the last week of September. And after that, those fish are going to move back into these bays and they might be all over these boat docks or wherever they might be. And so you're not going to find these fish consistently in the exact same spots week over week like we talked about. But for example, off the main river here, you might find that they set up on this little high spot with the shell bed here. First week of September. Third week of September, they're maybe off of this little high spot, 13 foot of water. Then they're on this little high spot that's in 10 foot of water. And then maybe they make their way back in this creek and then they're shallow. And so I'm trying to find these points where you're moving back in these shallow pockets, these shallow coves, and you can intercept those bass as they're funneling in. Even like in the mouth of this creek here where you have this nice flat point and a big flat here. Great little area these fish could pull up on. Now, another kind of hidden deal on a lot of these lakes is that you're going to have some of these giant flat areas with islands. And there are going to be some fish that are actually going to set up behind these islands, like right in this area here. And you can actually catch them behind these docks and stuff. And I've done this actually on Lake Dardanelle in the fall really well in Arkansas. And what will happen is that these fish will use these islands as almost like a creek where they'll pull in behind these islands and get under these boat docks and stuff. And there's going to be isolated shell beds as well as isolated grass patches off the points of these islands out here and off the bars that these islands create out in here. And you can find groups of fish that will actually pull up and start schooling and chasing shad, gizzard shad on these long ridges and also kind of on these flats behind these islands. And this is where I would be spending a lot of time just working through these areas with a big top water. One of my favorites for covering water on these like shallow flats, 3 to 5 foot of water offshore is, let me pull this up real quick, I don't know the exact name of it, so I need to find it real quick. Give me 1 second. One of my favorites is a really big top water. You can use the smaller top waters on this example as well, but there's one in particular. I'm not very good with coming up with bait names off the top of my head apparently, but it'll be worth the wait. I know I just bought them one time and I was like, oh, these things are great. Where are they? Oh, here we go. It's this teckle walking bait. And it's a pretty big, beefy bait. It's like a 4.5. There's actually a bigger one on here. I'm messing this up. Randy, what's a good topwater that you throw? While I'm finding this, what's a good walking topwater you would throw?
Well, the Super Spook is really good. I throw that Megabass Diamante a lot, which is bigger than just a regular size spook. But any type of walking top water is going to be a key deal. And also, another bait that works really good on some of the TVA lakes, if you're in the little bit cleaner water, which a lot of people don't throw, is a some type of a wake bait. The
Hmm.
wake baits are traditionally associated with more of the highland lakes. You know, during the post spawn a lot of times. But if you've got water visibility in that 3 foot range, which you do have on the lower end of Lake Chickamauga, you can catch them on those wake baits, just basically, running flatter banks, throwing them in behind docks around seawalls and riprap, that type of stuff. That's a real good one. But uh, and another one's is the old pop R. I mean, just like a pop R or I use that Mega Bass Pop Max a lot. Those are excellent baits on Chickamauga during the fall time of the year. But as far as covering water, the walking baits are going to be the big deal.
This is kind of what I'm talking about. This isn't the exact one, but like the Stray King Mega Dog, I'm talking about like a 5.5 to 6 inch big walking bait, because on Tennessee River you're going to have these giant gizzard shad, 5, 6, 7 inch gizzard shad, and the bigger gizzard shad are going to be on these flats, and that's what those 5 and 6 pounders are going to be going after. So I'll pick like the Striking Mega Dog, or I can't for life of me find the one I was using, but it was like a 5.5 inch when I bought a couple of them years ago, and I've just been using them forever. And I'm going for something either in like a bone color or a straight black. Those are two colors I throw, and you just want a giant topwater that you will walk over these big flats trying to call up these fish. And that's like one of my number one things to throw. And then I'll also be throwing a Magnum square bill. So like a KVD 8.0 definitely works, like a big Magnum square bill, 4.5 inches long. One that I really like, actually, Randy, that you showed me was the Megabass, the Big M. This
Yeah,
is
the
like
Big M 2.0 is really good like that for that.
Oh yeah, well it's the only bait I found that's 5 inches in length, like that really big walking topwater bait. But you also have it that it dives only like 6 feet deep. So
Yeah.
you have this big profile, but it dives 6 feet deep, and it's bigger. It's the biggest square bill that I've found that you can throw that will imitate those giant gizzard shad. And I'll throw it. The ones that I've thrown are this one right here, this like yellow belly with the chrome and the blue back. That's a really good color.
Yeah.
But that's like my go-to. I think I've caught like 2 or 3 fish on it so far this year, and all of them have been like big ones. And I'm gonna make a video about this soon, guys, about this throwing this Magnum square bill for these offshore fish. But whenever you have big gizzard shad offshore, big walking topwater, and a big giant plug like this is what I will use. And I'm just going to cover these flats, looking for hard spots, looking for gizzard shad kicking on the surface. And I'm just going to be burning water, covering water offshore. The other thing I'm looking for, though, too, on Chickamauga is as you get further up the river, again, you get those offshore grass beds. And this is where I'm going to be throwing that same walking topwater, but also like a chatterbait and a lipless crankbait, burning it through these offshore grass beds as you lead into these shallower cuts. So like an area like this is perfect, where you have the main river channel, then you have this grass bed here with some submergent grass as it leads into a little cut here and a cut back here. I'm just going to pull in here and I'm just going to fan cast with that topwater and with that chatterbait and try to locate those groups of fish that are moving into this grassy area. Again, these fish might pull up on one little patch of grass that might be the size of the front deck of your boat, like right there. And, I'm not showing my Google Earth. Sorry, guys. You're probably like, what are you doing? This is the grass here. You have grass here, and then you have this little pocket. And the grass is showing up here. And what you'll find is that you'll have submergent grass, and you might find that there's fish setting up on a little spot like this one day, and the next day they are following the bait fish and they move further back in here, and that's where they are the next day. And then the next day they're moving further back in here, and they're going to be relocating. And you're going to have to relocate these fish every single day a lot of times, but they're going to be in these general areas. And so I will spend a lot of time fan casting and just using baits that can cover water with offshore in the grass, burning it through the grass, trying to locate those groups of 3 to 5 fish. And in an 8-hour day, I might only find one of those good offshore grass areas, and I might only get 3 bites. So I then might have to mix in some boat docks or something else throughout the day to put a couple other keepers in the boat. And the fall time of year is definitely one of those times, Randy, where it's easy to not catch them or to zero or to come in with like 3 or 4 fish and not get a limit. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely so. I mean, fall, especially early fall is probably one of the toughest times of the year to fish anywhere. But one of the things I'll add to that, along with your big gizzard shad deal you're talking about, is I think a lot of our listeners out there have heard of Oliver Nye. He's got the Big Bass Streams YouTube channel.
Yep.
And he's part of the Mega Bass Pro staff, so I've had a chance to visit with Oliver a little bit. And he tells me a lot about Lake Chickamauga throwing the giant glide baits down there. And he said that he takes that Mega Bass 262 glide bait, which is a 10-inch long, 6-ounce size glide bait, and fishes it down there on some of those areas like you were talking about, Jonny, some of the lower end flat areas like that. And he talks about, he doesn't catch a lot of them, but he talks about the giants that he catches during the fall time of the year on those big glide baits. And I know it worked because he won the Lake of the Ozarks Big Bass Bash on that exact bait a couple of years ago. So the big glide bait is another bait everybody may want to consider trying on Chickamauga, because that lake has got giants in it. And that's one of the big keys on catching bass on a big glide bait is you have to have a lake that has big bass in it. And Chickamauga's got that. So that's another option you could always talk about.
That's a great suggestion there, Randy. And then one question is, how much does the current affect the fish in the fall? Is that a big factor for you when you're thinking about fall fishing?
Well, for me, I mean, current is always the most important when you're dealing with more of the main river applications. It doesn't have that big of an impact if you found some fish in some backwaters or the creeks. But if I'm fishing, like, for example, on Lake Chickamauga, if I'm fishing I'll show you the example right here. If I'm fishing some main lake docks on Chickamauga, let me find a few here. Like this area, like this particular section right here, a current on the main river will really activate and position those fish on any targets you have along the main river. So to me, if you're fishing main river, it's a big deal. If you're fishing creeks and backwaters, not so much.
Same, and that's kind of same deal for me. I spend most of my time offshore fishing on the main river, and one thing that I find on the main channel areas is that current in the fall will actually group those fish up better. And when that current's flowing, it will get those fishes up, spreading out and chasing and roaming on the shad, and get them to tighten down on a hard spot or a shell bed or a piece of grass. And so that current can be a big factor in helping get those offshore fish in position. If you don't have a lot of current in the fall, a lot of times that will hurt the offshore bite a lot, and I might have to just roll up shallow and junk fish most of the day, especially on a TVA lake. But when you get that current, that offshore bite is definitely going to be a lot more viable for sure. Man, we're almost at 600 viewers right now, Randy. We said to get to 500, and we're almost getting to 600. You guys are awesome. I don't know what you did. I should have done this a long time ago.
We appreciate that, guys. I mean, everybody that's listening tonight, man, we do not take this for granted. We sort of consider you guys part of our partners, because if it wasn't for the input and support we have from, people like yourself, we couldn't do this. We couldn't put this content out. So, man, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And we're just glad that you guys appreciate the content. They're here with us an hour in. I think that, being able to share areas and things like that is something that we really enjoy, and it seems like you guys like that as well. So if you guys like this content, definitely let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat if this is what you're really looking for from Fish the Moment and from these live streams, because we want to do these every week if you guys enjoy them. We are getting to 589. We dropped down a little bit. We're coming back up. But one thing really quick, guys, before we answer a few questions, is I want to remind you one more time about some of the stuff we have to offer on fishthemoment.com. If you guys haven't checked it out, go to fishthemoment.com. This is where we basically make most of the revenue for the business, which allows us to make videos, fish, create free content for you guys on YouTube, do these live streams, all that stuff. And one of the main things we like to offer are these Fish the Moment map breakdowns. you basically get a map with 60 different fishing areas across 4 different sections of a lake. And Randy spends like 4 hours on every single map, getting these areas right, knowing where you need to fish, both offshore and shallow. We give condition recommendations, best baits, best areas, all kinds of factors that will help you dial in these spots. And we have a lot of success stories with these maps. They're only $75, which is a lot less expensive than actually going and getting a lesson or a guided fishing trip with someone, and they definitely do produce results. And so these are something we offer. We offer them by each season of the year on lakes all across the country. There's so many maps we have available, which is really cool. And then another thing we offer are virtual seminars. One seminar that we actually are doing this week is the Advanced Jerkbait Fishing Seminar that's actually sold out, unfortunately, already. There's only 30 spots available, but we're going to be offering that again here very soon. And then also have an Advanced Offshore Bass Fishing class, the When, Where, and How, coming up October 22nd. There's only like 8 spots available. They're filling up as I'm literally speaking. And it's talking about how to understand how the different conditions, the current, the wind, the weather, cloud cover, stuff like that, affects offshore fish, how to hit the windows and the timing right offshore, and how to pick what areas to fish. When should you fish community holes versus when should you look for hidden areas, and how do you mix those two together to be an efficient offshore angler? And a lot of other secret stuff that I have not shared yet in YouTube videos just because there's so much to cover, and I'm going to be talking about that in the seminar. And I also have another advanced offshore bass fishing class. This is the 4th one. Every single one is filled up way ahead of time, and so I put this one out for November 12th. It's almost already full again, so if you guys do want to sign up for this, it's focused on trying to figure out how to read your electronics, find the fish with your electronics, and then determine should you fish there, what baits to throw, are the fish catchable, are they not, all kinds of stuff like that. So that is what we have offering on fishingmoment.com. There's a bunch of other stuff as well, so if you're interested, check it out, fishingmoment.com. And other than that, Randy, let's talk a little bit more about, in general, just some of the questions people are asking. One question that I'm seeing out here a lot is, when you're trying to fish up shallow, how much water are you covering in a day? That's one thing I feel like people don't realize when you are talking about shallow fishing in the fall. Like, you're covering a ton of water, am I right?
Well, the water coverage is all relative to what you're fishing as far as the type of cover and targets you're fishing. Because, say for example, if I'm fishing like some of the back ends of the creeks, like I showed earlier on Lake Pickwick, and I'm dealing with isolated wood targets, whether it be docks, lay down stumps, that type of stuff. If I'm fishing an area that has a lot of isolated cover like that, I'm fishing at a snail's pace. I'm breaking that down. I'm making multiple presentations, just really, really picking that part, fishing it thoroughly, not leaving any angle unturned. But if I'm fishing another type of pattern, say, for example, I'm burning a crankbait or a lipless crankbait or spinnerbait, down rocky banks, down windy rocky banks, that's when I'm covering a tremendous amount of water. I'm dealing with rogue fish, I'm dealing with loners, and the more casts that I make, the more odds that I have of catching a fish. So best way to answer that, if I'm fishing around targets in shallow water, I'm fishing slow. If I'm fishing more open water, banks, flats, bluffs, that type of stuff, I've got the trolling motor kicked up pretty high.
For sure, and that's what I do when I go offshore, guys. I kind of take the approach that Randy takes when you're on the flats and the shallower flats. I kick that trolling motor on 5 out of 10, and I am burning down the bank. By the way, we hit 600 viewers. That's the most ever on a Fishing Moment live stream by far, which is awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing. This is crazy. But what I focus on is I really want to get offshore, and I'm trying to cover water. In the fall, it's very weird because as you get later in the fall, I graph with my electronics a lot less. And one thing I'm actually getting on my boat is the Mega 360 imaging from Humminbird. And I think that's going to be a big game changer for me when I'm trying to fish offshore in the fall, because a lot of times I will just pull up on, like for example, this entrance to this major creek, and you have this big bar that runs out here, this big point. A lot of times in the fall, these fish will start pulling up on the shallower points and things like this in, here it's 10 foot of water, but sometimes it could be 5 or 6 or 7 foot of water. And just to kind of give you an example here, I'm going to get away from the Tennessee River just for a second and go to lake. I'm literally going to go fish tomorrow, just to give you a feel for something that's closer to home, is Lake Hudson over here in Oklahoma. And what I like to do on this lake in the fall is that you have these big major creek arms and stuff like this, and I kind of ignore those in the fall and focus on these smaller little cuts, these smaller areas off the main channel, and I catch a ton of fish on these areas on isolated rocks and isolated stumps out here in 3 to 5 foot of water leading into these pockets. So like out in this area through here and like around these points and through here. And what I literally do is just take a medium diving crankbait or a topwater, and I will burn down these flats, keeping my boat in 5 to 9 foot of water, casting up and fan casting until I hit a stump or a rock. And then once I catch a fish off a stump or a rock, a lot of times I will drop a waypoint and I will make repeated casts to that area with a shaky head or a Neko rig or something, and I can pull 3 or 4 extra fish off that spot. And then once I do that, I run and I keep going and I try to find another small group of fish. Offshore fishing in the fall a lot of times is not so much about finding mega schools of fish like you do in the summer. A lot of times you're finding groups of fish that are grouped up in maybe 3 to 5 fish schools, maybe 10 fish schools at the most. And you're following these fish from the main lake back in the creeks, and they will just stop off on little isolated pieces of cover or rocks or stumps and things like that. And you just have to burn a ton of water and fish them. And I think that with the Mega 360, I'm going to be able to actually see the cover in front of me before I get there, make my fan cast to them, and be a lot more efficient. One thing you could do is what I've done in the past. I literally will just graph this entire creek, find all the isolated stuff with side imaging before I get in there, mark it with waypoints, and then re-fish down these areas maybe an hour or two later. And I will know down this creek every 15 to 20 feet there's going to be some sort of unique piece of cover, a rocky area, something that's different. Maybe it might not be every 15 to 20 feet, it might be every 20, 30 yards. But what I'll do is I'll come through this creek and I'll hit every unique piece of cover through here, regardless of the depth. Some of it might be in 14 foot of water, some of it might be in 2 foot of water, it doesn't matter. But these fish are moving around and following the bait so much in the fall that you have to just bounce a lot of different isolated targets to put together a 5-fish bag of fish. So does that sound about right to you, Randy?
Yep, right on. I'd agree with all that, man.
Awesome. Well, guys, we have so many people on, which is awesome. What I'm going to do, one question is, are you dumping live scope for 360? No, I'm actually going to be running both. So I'm going to be like the Jacob Wheeler over here with live scope and 360 imaging to compare them. I think there's pros and cons to both, and I'm going to be making videos comparing them, talking about when one is better than the other, or vice versa. There are applications where that live scope, like we've talked about, Randy, it's a game changer. But a lot of the times it's not. And so I think understanding the differences in the times to use it, times not to use it is going to be very important. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I can't wait to use it with you this winter for jerkbait fishing. To me, that has so much potential for jerkbait fishing when those fish are suspended that I'm really curious to see how that thing works.
For sure. Awesome. Well, guys, we're actually going to announce the winner. I have my team go through all the comments, and we basically we can do like a random comment thing. And so I don't know how it works, but my team is smart. So we picked someone here, and of the stream, the winner is M. Thurman. I actually saw you post about that a second ago. M. Thurman. So if you can just shoot me an email to Jonny@fishthemoment.com. It's actually on the website, so let me show you that really quick. Just go to fishthemoment.com, go to the bottom, and you can just do Jonny@fishthemoment.com. Shoot me an email with your mailing address, and I will get you that $100 prize pack of baits out to you. And we're probably going to be doing this on all the streams going forward, guys, just because it seems like it works. So I have a bunch of different fishing tackle. I've been trying to figure out ways to give away fishing tackle in a way that is going to give back to you guys. And I think that the guys in the live stream here are the most loyal fans, Randy. And so I think that giving back to the guys who are here every week is going to be something we can do. And we have a lot of stuff to give away: tackle boxes, bait bags, everything. And so that's the deal. So M. Thurman, if you could just shoot me an email and I will get that prize back over to you. And again, thanks so much, guys, for sharing out the stream. There are 600 people that were on the stream today, which is crazy, and I cannot thank you guys enough for all the support for Fish the Moment. We put a lot of hours, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this. Randy can agree since he's joined on, and it's so great to just see the feedback and all the positive comments. It really makes it worth it. So anything else, Randy?
Yeah, I reiterate that, Johnny. Like I said, we just once again thanks everybody for your support for everything that we do. Because, like I said, if we didn't have your involvement with it and participation, we couldn't do any of this. So it's I just humbled by it. I'm really humbled by the support we've had for everything we're doing, and much appreciated. Much appreciated, everybody.
Awesome. One more comment here from Brian. He said, make sure that let everyone know this for the seminars that we offer on the website. Those are all recorded, so if you guys aren't able to reach them live, you can actually get a recorded seminar after the fact. So once the seminar is done, we'll send you a full recording of it, 3-hour recording. You can watch back as many times as you want. So just to let everyone know on that. So thanks for the call out there. M says almost 600. So M Thurman, again, thanks for shooting me that email. Winner there. Thanks for everyone, all the support. And other than that, guys, thanks so much for joining the live stream. And I got two of me on the screen now, which is kind of messing me up. Other than that, that looks kind of funny. But appreciate all the support, guys, as always. We're going to be posting this live stream to the Fish the Moment podcast app, or on the Apple Podcast app and Spotify. I'll also be uploading all of the other Fish the Moment videos that are like the Rick Clunn series, stuff like that, on the podcast if you want to listen to those while you're driving to the lake and stuff like that. So definitely check us out there. We'll be doing some stuff. I'm actually, Randy, I have my Humminbird Onyx unit that I just got taken off my boat. To get you guys incentivized to go check out the podcast, if you leave a comment on the podcast and leave a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app, one of those people that leaves a comment is going to be eligible to win my Humminbird Onyx unit, $1,500 unit. It was like a $3,000 unit when I first got it, with all my GPS coordinates on it. I'm leaving all my GPS coordinates from like 5 years of fishing on the unit, and I'm giving it away to one of the people who goes on and reviews the Apple Podcast, Fish the Moment podcast. So if you guys want a chance to win my Humminbird Onyx unit with all my waypoints, literally every waypoint on there, go to the Apple Podcast app, subscribe to the podcast, leave a 5-star review, and you'll be entered in to win that. So just another little thing. There's bunch of stuff we're doing. I'll talk about that in our videos too, so don't worry. But that'll be something that'll take a little bit longer. I'll talk about the goals and how all that works, but that's something that we're going to be doing. So anyways, thanks again, guys. Threw a bunch of stuff here at the end. Thanks, Randy, as always, for your input, for all the great information you share with all your knowledge and your experience. It's amazing. And again, thanks for everyone joining the stream. Have a good night.
Appreciate it.